Okay, great.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. We'll give everybody a few minutes to log on before we begin. Loving seeing those numbers very rapidly climb.
Oh yeah, I'm seeing them too. 30. Good morning, good evening, wherever everybody's signing in from.
Just give everybody a few minutes to get settled.
I'm Mukasha.
How are you? Marcela's coming.
Very good. We'll take you both. I should have put you both down anyways, but this is Mukasha, one half of the autochthonous force of nature up in the mountains of Mexico.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi, sorry.
Hey, how's it going?
Good, thank you. And you?
Good. Good to see everybody. We're letting participants roll in now. We're at about 40.
We will start in just a few seconds. Thank you all so much for being here.
It's early where I am, so I'm going to have coffee as in addition to wine.
You can take it slow.
We're gonna have wine.
They're not that much later than I am, so.
All right. Well, I think we should begin. Thank you all so much for joining us. I am personally so excited to dive into this conversation, and to not waste any time, I'm going to hand it directly over to Peter Weltman, who is the founder of the amazing Borderless Wine, to kick us off.
Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, from all the places in the world where you're logging in from. My name is Peter Weltman. I'm based in San Francisco, and I'm part of the AJC Access, which is kind of our youth leadership part of the entire AJC umbrella. I was a former sommelier in a past life in New York City for Michelin-starred restaurants. Concurrently, I always had this side of my life, which was part of social change and social entrepreneurship, specifically in the world of the Charles and Lynn Schusterman ROI Fellowship, for which I'm a two-time participant. And 2 years ago, kind of spawned at an AJC Global Summit in 2017, or actualized in a way, I created this idea, which is why we're all here today, called Borderless Wine. Well, Borderless Wine, it's a movement encouraging people to drink off the beaten path. But more than that, it's about creating radical collaboration and people-to-people ways to connect. And we use our medium, which is wine, which happened to be this medium that I also knew so much about given my previous professions. So in turn, we created this idea of the Borderless Wine Alliance, not only to tell these stories and create a platform, but create those pipelines to bring those wines to the rest of the world, mostly in the US, but also launched in Canada and Italy this past January. So yeah, my AJC journey really started when I returned back from Israel in 2016, and I'd written an article about a native grape wine being made by Rekanati Winery, an Israeli winery who collaborated with a Palestinian grower in the West Bank from the Bethlehem Hills. I then also went to Cremazon Winery in Bethlehem and found what I believe to this day is one of the greatest wineries in the entire world. So that started to change how I looked at wine and my profession, just from a pure entrepreneurial standpoint, these ancient grapes being made into unbelievable wine, you know, not the ones I had learned about in the Michelin-starred restaurants I was working in, but also I saw this much bigger opportunity. And it was a way that I always wanted to engage in a more substantive way in the world with, you know, engaging those tough questions about peoplehood, about people-to-people connections, about activism. And I realized I could use wine as a medium to do that. So when I came back to the US and in 2017 went to the AJC Global Forum, I heard so many stories of interfaith collaborations and things like that through the AJC. And really back in San Francisco, we do so much in our forum, especially with Eran Hazari, who is a huge official member of AJC and runs our access. And those, all those opportunities and, you know, the courage of AJC to allow us to do that, something that means a lot to me. So I really also just want to take one moment and say how I'm looking at today, not like oh, we couldn't have this in person. This is like the second best. Being on this call together is the true, like most full actualization of our vision, which was bringing the most diverse voices to the table to talk about what we do, how we work together, how we collaborate, and we're able to do it remotely. So just taking a moment to appreciate that this is the greatest, you know, to the zenith of our vision at Borderless Wine that we're getting to use today. On the call, you'll have people who are in our Borderless Wine Alliance. So there's Eddie Chami calling from Dubai, who is a winemaker in Lebanon. Abdallah Rishi, who's a Syrian refugee, who is also an unbelievable winemaker in Lebanon. He works with Eddie at Couvent Rouge in the Bekaa Valley in Deir al-Akhmar. He also has his own wine brand that Borderless Wine worked on together with him called Darisha, or Rishi's Home, where he's making wine in Lebanon, but with a vision of going to Syria to make it. There's Juliana Saras calling from Bethlehem, and her family's unbelievable Dabuki vineyards in the like 1,100 meter elevations of Bethlehem, growing a native grape, Dabuki. Adam Cassis, who's calling from Latroun, just outside of Jerusalem. It's a 1850s Crusader Trappist monastery, and he's the winemaker there. And both of them collaborated on a wine that we helped spearhead at Borderless Wine Alliance called Status No, which we'll talk about a little later. And finally, we have Marcelo Castrovera and Mukasha, who are calling from central Mexico, up in the high elevations of San Felipe, who really look at Mexican history to make their natural wines at their winery called Autochthonous. So you'll hear, you've just heard a really diverse group of regions.
Quite diverse.
And places, and you'll hear how we all come together under the values of Borderless Wine, looking at things socially, politically, culturally, financially, and ecologically, and how we all work together in Borderless Wine.
Amazing. What an introduction. I can confidently say that this is, at least from a geographical perspective, the most diverse panel we've had thus far in our remote access program. So what an amazing opportunity. Before we dive into the discussion, I just want to remind our audience that if you have any questions throughout the program, go to the bottom center of your screen. You'll see a Q&A box, and feel free to submit any questions you may have, and we'll be sure to get to them later in the program. So let's dive in. Peter, you told us about Borderless Wine and how you came up with the idea, but I would love to hear a bit more about what made you passionate about using wine to break down metaphorical and physical borders.
Thank you for asking. I always wanted to do something that I felt was important. And I had this life in fine dining and you know, the upper echelon of New York City. But I also had this other life where I was surrounded by these social entrepreneurs, these activists who were kind of getting their hands dirty and really at the front lines. And I realized at the ROI Summit in Jerusalem that that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to have a life of valor and importance, and I was willing to leave wine on the table to find it. But at the same time, I had written that article for Food and Wine magazine about this native grape burgeoning movement, both in Israel and in Palestine, and collaborations between the two. And all of a sudden, my worlds crossed, and I was able to see that wine was this global tool. It was this global product that people love to know about and learn about. So it had this kind of mystique and allure to it. On top of the fact it's a really big global business, billions of dollars business that impacts, global palates and supports local communities. And that's what I really glammed onto. So I started looking outside the normative areas that I was taught to know about in wine, kind of thinking like an entrepreneur, an activist, taking ideas from all these realms, honestly, mostly outside of wine, and applying those back to the wine business. And what I found were all of these opportunities to unearth, together with the people you see on this panel, to tell their stories collaboratively, and not just talk about wine, but potentially talk about more.
Amazing. And that it seamlessly ties into the work that Access Global within AJC does. We're the young professional sect of AJC, and we're working to groom the future Jewish leaders of the world through global advocacy, through soft diplomacy. And it just so seamlessly ties into the work that you do. And that being said, I would love to hear from everyone else on the call about what made you want to become a part of the Borderless Wine Alliance, and what made you want to become a stakeholder in this work. And
Yes.
welcome
So
to answer.
I think a great place to start would be with Eddie and Abdallah, and how we connected, and the work that they do at Couvent Rouge, supporting their local community, inviting me to Lebanon to witness it firsthand, and then the further work that Eddie does at Couvent Rouge with Abid. So Eddie, I'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey team, good to be on this call, and I'm pleased that I'm able to talk about what we do in Lebanon, and what we do, the work I do with Peter and the whole Borderless Wine community. We're very fortunate to be where we are in the Bekaa Valley, 1,200 meters, snow-capped mountains to our right, left, and south. Amazing terroir. We're really gifted. When God created the earth around that part of the world, he really looked after grapes and wines there. He really made sure we made great wines. So we're very fortunate. We have that formula. Now, we also have, we're a country that has borders everywhere, and I'm very fortunate to know Abid and to work with Abid, which is, and other Syrian refugees that are in Lebanon, given the situation the whole region is in, to be able to give people opportunities to learn and to dabble with new things and to learn new experiences, things that are non-mainstream outside, so things that are maybe stigmatized as well. So I'm very fortunate to be in that position. The work that I've done with Abid is very rewarding, and Abid is on the call, but Abid is one of many that we do this work with. It's great to feel like you can teach someone some skills, learn a thing or two about their culture, being able to take this back to Syria one day. The work that I do with Peter, and to listen to the work that Peter does with other communities, whether it's in Mexico or whether it's in Israel or Palestine, or the global ecosystem that surrounds Borderless Wine is very attractive. And that's the work that I started doing with Abid, and the conversations that I started having with Abid and other people in the wine industry that cross my borders, sort of made me, when I heard about the work Peter was doing, and I'm like, yeah, that's very interesting. That really aligns with my values. And to see the panel that we have here, like folks like Adam and Juliana and Marcelo, and we're completely demystifying borders. So that's what really, that's what Borderless Wine means.
Yeah, and I'll
Oh, sorry, go ahead, Peter.
I'll just chime in and say that the work that Eddie does at Couvent Rouge, which is the wine, if you look at Alex's screen that's kind of behind her, they were working with their
Quite
community
delicious.
to pull up hash fields and plant vineyards to look at a prosperous future for their community. So there was so much that attracted me to them, and the fact that they welcomed me to Lebanon and, rolled out the red carpet and showed me a place that, I didn't know I was welcome in, a place I didn't know I could go to. But what Eddie was getting at is that wine showed and continues to amaze me at its ability to demystify borders, both within our working relationships, but also we can see in the way that when it hits a table, the way that it can also bring people around a table as well. So let's see.
I would love to hear from, if anyone else wants to chime in about why they wanted to get involved in Borderless Wine before we dive in a little bit deeper. If anybody else has anything they want to add before we keep going. Nope.
No one wants to join me? I can say that. Juliana's muted.
I've had my input. I can talk about this for hours, but I'll give it to Anna. I see Anna moving, or Juliana. Juliana's putting her hand up. I think she wants to talk. I'm not sure. It's between Anna and Juliana.
Yeah, okay, I can speak. Actually, we got in contact through Adam at the beginning, so it wasn't some kind of an accident, but it was a very nice accident, I would say. So what was your question again?
Just what made you want to become a part of the Borderless Wine Alliance and why you wanted to become a stakeholder in this work?
Okay, well, the broad vision that Borderless Wine has, its social vision and its cultural vision, it's very and it's empowering to people like us, to small wineries, farmers in a place like the place we are in Bethlehem. It's a small community. It's a small vineyard. It's nothing big. And he came and took our grapes, and made such a great wine from them. For sure, it goes to Adam as well. He also, how can I say it? Yeah, I'm a bit nervous. So
he was a part of that vision, and that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
He has a great part in it. And yeah, it's my dad is also, I'm speaking in the name of my dad actually, and he's very happy that we are collaborating with Peter in to make his vision come true, and our work to make our work go to the US and have our wine be tasted all over the world. So
Amazing.
that's for me for now.
Perfect. While we're on the subject of you and Adam, and anyone else who wants to chime in
Okay.
mission.
Okay. Yeah, sorry.
I just wanted to sort of veer the conversation in a slightly different direction. In Borderless Wine's mission, you talk about how wine is a product of soft diplomacy and provides the ability to facilitate cross-border initiatives and dialogue, like we've already broached on in this conversation so far. But I would love to hear from all of you about how Borderless Wine has made an impact in this realm, specifically in the lens of Israel-Palestine and those relations and tensions.
Yeah, I can kind of kick it off.
Okay.
So, for me, the work of Borderless Wine is people to people. And those are the most important values. I think that the greatest human potential is through radical collaboration. And when I thought of Borderless Wine, I always thought of the idea of activism, but that felt a little like a little strong. So what I realized is collaboration, and that radical degree of it is what was going to move everything forward. And to me, that came from people to people work. And before I could reach out to other people, I had to take an audit of myself. I think it was Rumi who said something like, yesterday I thought I was smart, so I was going to change the world. Today I'm wise, so I'm going to change myself. And when I think of that, I started to change myself. And when I started to change myself, I had the confidence to reach out, you know, to take a stand or extend a branch to see if there were other people out there. And what I found is that what I think of as more of a moderate voice, and wine is a great vehicle for that. I found people who were willing to work and collaborate with me. I mentioned the story that I wrote for Food and Wine way in 2016. It was an amazing initiative, but I felt like there was still some trepidations within that narrative. The wine grower wasn't comfortable divulging his or her name. The wine, well celebrated for what it was, as the collaboration, like there wasn't the drive to keep that going wasn't quite there through some further research that I conducted. And I wanted to do something that was completely open and completely unfiltered in the way that everybody knew who everybody was, and having that kind of goodness behind it. And I said every step of the way, I was willing to not do the project if somebody felt uncomfortable or didn't want to fully participate. And I was happy to leave it on the table. But what you find, the more you kind of throw out there your ideas and convictions, the more you find people who are, working with you. Adam, I don't know if you have something to add. Adam works at Lebanon Winery. He's from Birzeit. He's a wine grower there as well. And he has a really dynamic, idea. Adam's a Palestinian guy working in Israel. He's a wine grower. He's got all these, he's super talented on top of all of that. So maybe you have some context to, working across these spaces.
Okay, first of all, it wasn't that easy to do all these work because, there is a checkpoints. It's not easy to enter the grapes, and it wasn't easy even if it wasn't easy to find good vineyards as Sarras vineyard.
Yeah.
And a guy from Bethlehem helped me and told me, look, there's a good vineyard and in a good family and very good dabuki, and he tried. So I go to visit and I shocked because it was really good vineyards, 20 years old. The people over there, Abu Nicola, it was really nice person. That's why I really like to do this wine. It was my first time to do this dabuki. And, when I made the dabuki, this dabuki in this vineyard, all vineyards, the native one and organic, it shocked me. Really, it shocked me. And for me now, the best wine that ever can made here is the dabuki, or the grapes that it was grown here from a lot of time, a lot of years. And now the dabuki, I think it's success now, and very good.
It just shows how good wine can bring great people together.
Yeah.
And Adam, I'm just wondering, has the process gotten any easier as time has gone on? Has anything changed? Have you felt anything change over time?
The most hard thing that just to cross the grapes. It's really very, very hard. I have to make insurance, to make analysis, to pay a lot for translate. It was really hard, and every year it comes a little bit more harder because they don't want to enter any grapes or fruits because of the viruses, etc. And because it comes from Palestine too. This is the thing that make me give me some push to do this wine, and we did it.
Yeah. And I will say a couple of things. Adam and his work has been recognized by Adam Montefiore from the Jerusalem Post, a gentleman who's really been the forefront wine writer in Israel, and he's always actually written about wine transcending borders. He's always written about wines from Lebanon, Chateau Muzar, which is a very famous winery. So, you know, even though these things are tough, which is what Adam was talking about, Borderless Wine, I don't ask, it's not about it's the consequences of not trying these initiatives. And that's what we do. What does it take to just try something? And in the face of the impossible, we've often made things possible. And testament, excuse me, I'm losing my voice, but testament to all the stakeholders involved who were willing to, you know, put themselves out there to say something. Somebody could have written a piece of literature or an article about a cross-border idea or whatever. We did it. And taking action is one of the hardest things in the world to do. And that's why I transitioned from writing about these topics to doing something, because the action component of these products. And at the end of the day, you have a nice, amazing wine to tell that story, which gets a lot more global buy-in because it's a safe product to understand. But to take action is really difficult. And that's why I continue to work with the people around me. And I hope they continue to work with me, because we're action oriented to do things that maybe looked impossible.
And that is truly the only way, not the only way, but one of the most powerful and impactful ways to inspire change and to inspire forward movement. That seamlessly flows into my next question, which I actually want to go back a little bit to the story of Cavant Rouge and how the community worked together to transition hash fields into vineyards, and the story of Eddie and Abdullah, and, you know, the impact that producing a Lebanese wine made by a Syrian refugee had in the community. I mean, it's a really important story for our audience to understand, but something that I really want us to hash out is what we hope that this work can inspire in the future in Syria, in Lebanon, in the region, on a global scale. I would love to flesh that out.
Right, so I guess you're throwing a curveball at me then.
Sorry about that.
That's okay. Yeah, so just a quick recap about the history of cannabis in the Bekaa Valley. It was brought as a recreational crop to the region in the last 150 years. It was actually brought in by an Indian doctor, and the consumers back then were the English and Australian soldiers that were positioned there during the various world wars that, you know, during that, right at the end of the Ottoman Empire. Yeah, it was just you know, what soldiers would use as a recreational kickback, given there was no Snapchat, TikTok, and Instagram back in those days. So that kept them busy. And this sort of, when all these sort of wars moved on, the crop stayed. And it stayed because it did, like, you know, the Bekaa Valley is very fertile, and cannabis really flourished in the region. And economies were built on this crop, illicit crop and illegal crop. And with time, it started dominating the lives of certain towns, whether it being their dependency on farming this crop or others that were using it for illicit reasons, like consuming it. Then what really came after this is solving the social issues, because it's illegal. And that's when grapes came in. How do we remove this crop, replace it with something that's more tolerant, something that flourishes really well in the region, something that's sustainable, and grapes just made a lot of sense. If you go back in history, this valley was farmed with a lot of grapes hundreds and hundreds of thousands of years ago. So we went back to the roots. And with wine, that's how Abed and I crossed path. We're basically a project in the valley, a cooperative and a winery to basically fix this or try to solve this historic problem. Abed was a refugee that came from Syria, loved wine, wanted to get into wine a lot more, and I was fortunate enough to cross path with Abed, bring him into the winery, give him an opportunity to start making his wine and his label at Couvent Rouge, as well as having ours in parallel to that. And Abed is an amazing winemaker. Like, he's very talented, he's very witty, he just gets it, he's very natural. Although he's not very talkative today, he is usually. Yeah, I think he just has a gift. Like someone would have a talent for art, Abed has a talent for winemaking, and we're very fortunate to have someone like him on the team. And yeah, where Abed is from, whether he's from Syria or Lebanon, it really doesn't matter. It's a great person, great value. He's an amazing guy to have on the team. Looking forward to doing more vintages with Abed and hopefully getting some of our wines in the next couple of years over to you guys to consume and enjoy.
Yeah, I'll add, thank you, Eddie. I'll add a little texture to that too. So the Bekaa Valley has a old Phoenician temple. It was actually even Greek. It was called the Heliopolis. It's now in the area of Baalbek. There's a 2,000-year-old Bacchus temple there. So this is like serious wine viticulture history. And the work that Couvent Rouge did before there was a winery, it was all a cooperative, transitioning, bit by bit, acre by acre, hectare by hectare, dunam by dunam for those of you in Israel, transitioning from hash to vineyards. There's over 250 small growers at about a hectare each who have transitioned. It's unbelievable. They have completely influenced the entire Bekaa Valley, specifically Dar al Ahmar, which is where Couvent Rouge is located. These vineyards are fair trade, they're organic, and these producers now, these growers, pardon me, who had every year to wonder if their crop was going to be, slashed and burned by the government, because remember, it is illegal, but it was the only way as a subsistence farmer, now have this incredibly viable option. And with vineyards, there's an expression, you plant pears for your heirs, like pear trees. There's a similar idea with vineyards. You plant them to root yourself in a region, because it takes 5 years before you can even administer a crop. Number one. Number two is the work that Eddie's done with Abdullah. Abdullah was a stonemason from Syria, so he's a total artist. And he took winemaking and just ran with it. And with him and Eddie, their collaboration, which maybe people on the call don't really realize, but there's a lot of border tensions between Lebanon and Syria. It used to not be that way, but since Syria has been embroiled in a war, it's been that way. So Eddie takes a lot of chances, and so does Couvent, and so does the whole ecosystem to work with well, I say they take chances. They take chances to work across the border, but actually when you're on the ground, people live together. And that was a really beautiful experience for me to see. And, to see both sides of this coin flourishing was very special. So I wanted to make sure we said we got that bit in there. So first of all, just want to make sure everyone is remembering you can add questions down at the bottom. So I think I only see one so far, so maybe we'd love to see more. In the meantime, you'll notice this vein of history across all of our producers, people reviving old grapes, old techniques, regional stories. And that is completely in line and a part of what makes our newest producer in the Borderless Wine Alliance with Autochthonous, and that's Marcelo and Mukasha calling in from Mexico. they have revitalized these old ideas and old stories around viticulture in Mexico that a lot of people probably don't know, and created this idea of very natural wines, so being stewards of the earth, but also of Mexican history. And that's incredibly important to us at Borderless Wine, on top of the fact that they're empowering people in their community who work for them. So I'd love to hear from Marcelo and Mukasha about their vineyards and their work with Mexican clay, amphora, and their natural techniques in making wine. We have to unmute them.
1 second.
There we go.
Oh.
Hello, I was saying what a pleasure to be here and learning so much from everyone. Thank you, everyone. So yeah, we are in Guanajuato state in Mexico, and we are producing natural wine in vessels or clay amphoras. The state we're in is where the independence movement for Mexico to be independent from Spain started 200 and some people. So Mexico doesn't have the story that many of the countries in the world and where you are of making wine. You know, the Spaniards brought the grapes to us, and we started doing such good wine that the Spaniards decided to burn vines in Mexico, Spain, the producing. It's kind of like a sad story, but Mexico is reviving in that sense. Makes a role of natural. We are in the mountains. Our elevation is quite high, and we have tried to put in a vineyard. Although we're not experts, we come from started 5 years ago, mezcal and other things. So we get our grapes from local sources where we see that the hand in the vineyards is organic, biodynamic, or low intervention at all. We're trying to work with these, I want to say endemic grapes, because Mexico doesn't have the endemic grape. You got one of them is Rosa de Peru, and it could be between a Vitis vinifera and a table grape, where 50 years ago they would ferment and then they still to make brandy here in Mexico. It was a big drink. So my wife, my lovely in Switzerland, studying hotel management. By the way, we had a lot of Lebanese friends, Syrian friends, and we went to Lebanon to visit. Such a great country. I can't wait to taste your. It's here to go and make wine there in clay too, since there is a bigger tradition of making wine. So anyways, we started out of nothing. We do everything by hand without any machinery. And of course, we natural ferment with low intervention or no intervention at all. And we don't add any sulfites. We produce white, rosé, orange, red, and a little bit of Pernat and a little bit of fortified wines. We're happy. We want to learn. We want to try many natural wines. Sadly, Mexico, well, the culture, it's behind the state. So it's slowly starting to grow the consumption and the understanding of what a natural wine is. So I think that's our story. You want to add something? So.
Perfect.
I think
Amazing.
along finding, hi, along with finding those very funky varieties of grapes to work with, we're also, when we were looking into making wine in the amphoras, it took us a while to actually find we live next to the town which specializes in making wood clay, yet surprisingly the tradition of doing it by hand is dying off. So as we were searching artists and we were looking, researching who still had the knowledge of how to make a bigger, larger vessels that we needed. It was an interesting journey, I think, to kind of go. It's a family thing. It's a traditional thing as well. The working with clay. So we would go from the son to the father until we found the original source of someone who used to, back in the days, work with clay completely completely by hand, just like we make the wine. So that was also a nice way of kind of impulsing of for that tradition to come back, that people see that there's still a need. Hopefully, as more people start making natural wine, that's the hope here. Maybe they will get. We're hoping to bring attention to these artisans. They have more work, and so this tradition doesn't die off. So I think that's also an important part of.
Absolutely.
Amazing.
Yeah, that's a huge value. So sorry, I go to Octogono where they are so that my cell phone doesn't work because it's my favorite place to go, kind of off the grid. So I know that it was a little part of it was really a bit choppy, but to summarize, what Mukasha and Marcelo are doing at Octogono, and the reason we love them is really what Mukasha kind of honed in on at the end is they see their work as cultural arbiters of keeping old traditions alive and finding old vineyards, but also local artisans, not bringing in a clay amphora from Italy, but looking at what's local in their area, which is actually a history that we're learning existed before. So their commitment to land stewardship, to artisan stewardship, and to being kind of a cultural vessel is what really excited us, and just the general ethos of being at their estates up in the mountains. It's one of those magic thin places to be in.
Amazing. This is all so interesting, and I feel like we could talk about this for hours, but I'm gonna veer us back a little bit and ask one more question before we go to as many audience questions as we can before time's up. All of you have honed in on the ability for wine to unite strangers at a table in order to foster understanding and tolerance, and that seamlessly aligns with AJC's main priorities, which include combating and radicalism and extremism, fighting for basic human rights, and promoting intergroup and interreligious dialogue. So along with this, where do you see the impact of the Borderless Wine expanding in the future? What are your hopes? And what are you hoping on a broad scale for this work to do besides creating delicious wine?
Adam, what do you think?
I think, if we keep like this to do the organic with this story, and every year we have in the wine, always we have new things in the wine. Of course, in the future it will be really much better, organic, of course.
Mm-hmm.
And it will be our sign, or our this is for the borderless. It's like this is the wine, like it has your signature, and I think it will go very well, and
Yes.
the people will like it very much because it's organic.
Right. So using that as a way to talk about land and bringing people together. Eddie, what about from your vantage point? We'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, so this is an amazing platform. I'd like to see myself being able to use it to experiment more with new ideas, collaborating with more so with Adam or Juliana or Marcelo, just doing stuff together. I mean, we're going through difficult times at the moment, but how do we work across regions, across borders, across cultures and societies to be able to do something radically different. What you normally see and you tend to see are these wine movements that maybe at times are very localized, and having a platform like this to be able to work collaboratively across continents is amazing.
Yeah, and I'll speak from our side of the world, from the borderless side of the world. You know, we started this. I started this knowing where it was going to go. It was kind of you know, build the bridge as you're walking, you know, step by step, and it was kind of against my nature, really, to do something that wasn't fully actualized and created and planned for. But that lesson in kind of you know, do first, ask questions later, or create something and don't ask for permission, ask for forgiveness. That first step was such a big hurdle. And I think we run into that a lot in our lives with a lot of things. You know, to take that first step is so hard. But I've noticed with me, and then the snowballing effect through a lot of hard work and a lot of dead end doors and people telling me that what I would do is impossible. I heard that this forum we're having today, in its theories, would be impossible. And, you know, I'm not motivated by somebody saying it can't happen. I'm just motivated in the positive of what is possible, what could be possible. So, you know, this work or this idea and what we're doing, if people leave with anything today, you know, it's to think about in your own lives, like where we stop, you know, what holds us back. What do we have in our own, you know, playbook, in our own backlog of experience that can turn into something? So, you know, sometimes I don't know where we're going, and I've learned that that's okay.
Amazing. We are getting so many great questions from the audience. I think we'll have time for 2, so I'm going to try and combine as many as I can. But something really interesting that keeps coming up is, Peter, I'm wondering, or maybe even Eddie, I'm wondering if you could talk about how brewing in predominantly Muslim countries works. As we know, alcohol, very observant Muslims typically do not drink alcohol. So how does that work in terms of your distribution, and is it difficult? Walk us through the process.
Yeah, actually, it's not difficult at all. I mean, look, it's no surprise. You said brewing, but I think you meant winemaking.
Winemaking, sorry.
Or both. The brewing was actually, or arak, the method of brewing and distillation was actually invented by the Muslims. But I don't want to talk sectarian now. People make wines in history in Iraq, in Syria, and Lebanon, in Algeria. There's great winemaking regions all across even Central Asia, Turkey. So I think people have just accepted to live with each other's beliefs and put these aside and just focus on what brings us together. So yeah, just respecting each other's beliefs and values and saying, yeah, we're all the same and we're all different, and just getting on with making great wines. And people that want to drink wine, fantastic. People that just don't want to drink wine, they don't. And, you know, Lebanon, we tolerate all values and all beliefs. And like I said, look at Algeria, northern Algeria, Morocco, Turkey. Amazing wines coming out of the region. So yeah, I think it's a solved problem.
Yeah, and you know, that was on a base level. Borderless Wine, or wine in general, was able to tell a different story of a region you thought you knew, and you had one idea about. When Eddie and I met, it was actually because I went to Lebanon to really write the story about Syrian winemaking, and Abdullah. Actually, it was really kind of an Abdullah story. And what I learned and put into my article was shocking, that Syria has these unbelievable endemic, autochthonous, indigenous grape varieties that is still used to either make sultanas to eat, but there's also winemaking, and that it exists. Just to know that something like that exists, there's just a power in that. And of course, in the article and all that, we get into the finite details, but it's such a great question because it shows a basic, that from basic levels, we just don't know a lot of things about a lot of countries. And those entry questions are so invited and so important, and to get over that first hump of maybe starting to change your perception of a place.
That's really helpful. Thank you. I know, Peter, that you are going to share on either your website or your Facebook page where our audience can get all of these amazing wines that the Borderless Wine Alliance is producing. But the audience is wondering how you've been leveraging the Borderless Wine Network in North America. Has it been easy or difficult for the Alliance to gain distribution and awareness across the various channels? What has your experience been?
It's a great question. Thank you for asking it. Everything takes hard work and commitment, and hearing that that my vision is impossible, because I didn't want to just be a wine business. I wanted to be a social change agent that used wine to do that. And remember, I wear two hats. I wear my fine dining Michelin star sommelier trusted wine journalist hat, and then I also wear my hat as somebody who's just so in love with meeting people. And when I see a border, I see an opportunity, and I wanted to, I dive into things. But there's a balance, because I wouldn't be here talking about these wines if they weren't excellent. Now, I have my own interpretation of excellent, just in the way that maybe you love French food and the highest level of that, but you also might love the highest level of Thai food, in the streets of Bangkok. And those are both excellent, truthful experiences. So I had to kind of take my own ideas and really own them, in support of and supporting together as accomplices with all the people who are on this call. But in doing so, we found that the wines stood up for themselves, just from empirical tasting perspectives. They were unique. They came from unique grape varieties, terroirs, and the things that excite us sommelier brains. But when I first offered these larger ideas into the world, the outpouring was unbelievable. Sommeliers wrote to me and said, wow, you've given me like a wellspring of value to my work. I want more. I want to do more. People outside of wine, which were kind of the communities that I was hoping to get, which is why it's so special to be on the call for AJC, and just organizations who do actual social work as their value proposition. I started to receive interest from those communities. So putting it out there turned out to be the greatest thing in the world. Now we have our stakeholders that we work every day from a business side. Borderless Wine Alliance, which is our import wing, it's an accidental business to me. And I mean that because I just wanted a platform, or I thought I only wanted a platform, but I realized that people wanted to taste the difference and wanted to taste these things. So right. We created a business, and that has been such an enlivening part. I'll finish it with that. I didn't want to just start to tell more and more stories. I wanted to root down and commit to the stories that we already found. So everyone on this call, all of these imports took at least 2 years to make happen, because there's so much more that goes into this besides bureaucracy of imports and country legislation and things like that. But we want to know, are these people who we want to work with together, both they vetting me and the same, and creating a dynamic dialogue together.
Well, I think that we can all agree that we could be here for 4 more hours, but given that we have 1 minute left, I just want to thank all of you so much for joining us today. Peter, Adam, Marcelo, Eddie, Juliana, Abdullah, everyone on the call, thank you so much. I want to tell everybody that our next remote access program will be Monday, May 18th at 2 p.m. Eastern, and we'll be discussing the challenges to democracy and stories of Jewish communal resilience in Latin America. And you will receive all the information of how to register for that in our follow-up email. In the meantime, cheers.
Cheers. And, remember, don't settle for the status quo. And, for us, this is one wine, but it totally is who we are. We look at things as status no. We look to push through that. My website, borderless.wine, www.borderless.wine. And if you sign up for something, I can kind of help you figure out where to find these wines across the US and in some other places in the world. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you. Bye, team.
Bye.
Bye.